Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started and let people join in, and if we have time, we'll have them introduce themselves once they come into the room. So I want to thank everybody. This is the Broadband Hui. This is the 16th week in a row for us convening the Broadband Hui, and I really appreciate everybody that's been part of this growing group and the momentum that's created around looking at broadband, and from a broadband infrastructure, from a digital equity standpoint. I think we're actually kind of moving the needle, so I appreciate everybody's help in that regard. So let me start off. What we normally do is do a little round of quick introductions, and then we'll get into some of the topics that I put into the draft agenda. My name is Bert Lum. I'm the strategy officer for Broadband in the state of Hawaii. I'm resident in the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And just as by way of kind of, why we got started to look at some of the helping to close the digital divide that was created once everybody needed to work at home and shelter in place. So we started to look at education. We look at telehealth. We're looking at telework, and trying to address the whole spectrum of short-term, mid-term, and long-term, but address things that are tactical that could be addressed within the capacity and power that we have here as the Hui. So that's kind of what we got started. That's kind of the the mission of the Hui, and I want to give a chance to a couple of the co-organizers along with me to do a quick intro. Jeannie Skog, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, morning everybody. Jeannie Skog. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Alliance of Hawaii, and broadband expansion is one of our top priorities within EDA. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. Christine Sakuda.
Good morning, everyone. Christine Sakuda with Transform Hawaii Government, Executive Director. It's a nonprofit organization that supports open, transparent, and accountable state government through using technology and innovation. And I also sit on the IT steering committee with the state CIO and a couple of other folks here. Nice to see everyone.
Thanks, Christine. So I'm gonna try to pick out some of the new people that I don't recognize. I guess Linda, where are you from?
I'm the executive director of the Maui County Workforce Development Board.
Oh, great. So did you get invited by Jeannie?
I got invited by Jeannie, and I had a conversation with you once on the phone about it, yeah.
Okay, great. Brianna, I know you've been, I don't know, on, listening, aware, but I'll give you a chance to do an intro.
Yeah, thank you, Bert. Aloha, Brianna Rose here, Director of Operations and Partnerships for Hawaii Green Growth. Also have Megan from Hawaii Green Growth on the call as well. We're happy to be here. I know our Executive Director, Celeste, was able to join last week, and we've been in conversation with Bert for some time and many others on the call, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Brianna. I'll give Megan a chance to say hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan. I'm the project lead for the dashboard at Hawaii Green Growth. Happy to be joining you guys again.
Thanks, Megan. Let's see. Olu, I know you've been on before, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
Aloha, everybody. Olu Campbell, Community and Government Relations Manager for Kamehameha Schools. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks. Let's see, going down the list here. Kanoi, Kamehameha School too, right?
Hey, aloha kako. Yes, Ka'ano Iwa, Kamehameha Schools. I think I was on a call with Bert on Wi-Fi on Wheels. This was several months ago, but mahalo for having me. Just sitting in to listen. I know we have a lot of representation from our organization. Mahalo.
Thanks for joining us. I think I recognize everybody else. Let's see. Anybody that I missed that's new that wants to do a quick intro? Workforce development. I assume that's Allison, right? Okay. Well, there's some mystery people on the call. I'm assuming workforce development is Allison. So with that, I do want to kind of go quickly over some, I guess, policies that are kind of moving through the legislature, and just going to give you an awareness of some of the bills. I think we already talked about SB 2527. That did not get through the committees, so that basically died. There's a couple bills that you might want to kind of keep an eye on. One was a Senate Resolution 78, and in fact, I put it up on the website. So if you go to the Broadband Hui website, which is broadband.hawaii.gov, under the Broadband Hui, I list some of these things that I'll mention today. So SR 78 is a resolution that basically outlines, DBED working with the legislature to create 100,000 jobs by 2022. So, that's going to be a big initiative, I think, within DBED.
Yeah. Good luck.
Another one that I wanted to bring your attention to is SB 126, which is a budget bill. And if you look through that budget bill, that specifically around section 15 and 16, you'll see some monies that were appropriated out of the CARES Act that will go to DBED. Unfortunately, it's not going to go to broadband, but it'll go to HTDC and Dennis Ling's group, which is business development. It still needs to get signed by the governor, but it's something that's I think worthwhile kind of tracking. So any of you policy wonks out there, please feel free to check out those bills and kind of keep an eye on them. Of course, if you have any questions about that, feel free to chime in. I know we have Senate President and Senator English on the call as well, and I'm sure they have some insight into how these bills will progress. Senate President, you want to say anything about the policy bills that are in play right now?
No, we're expecting just about all of them to move forward. And as far as the resos go, if anybody had tracked that jobs creation reso, the initial resolution said 60,000, and based upon DBED's own testimony, they felt that was the target that they were shooting for, and not 60,000. So it was amended based upon their testimony. So we're certainly optimistic that their confidence will come to fruition and we can do that job. So we'll see.
Thanks. So I do want to give Jeannie a chance to just give us a quick update on that. Don't make faces. Everybody can see you. On the update for the broadband strategic plan. There were some quick updates or edits that I needed to do, and it's back in your hands. And I think there's a target of trying to get that out pretty quickly. I just wanted to give you a chance to. I put you on the spot.
Gee, thanks. What's friends for, right? So we got through the initial phase of it, which is to develop the goals, objectives, and strategies. And we will be submitting that to the Office of Planning. But we will roll from that into updating the background piece in the next couple months. So just want to let you know about that. We will be reaching out to get feedback on the update, which has been more than an update, but again, really want to thank everyone for their input on the HUI, because that really helped us to refresh and make the plan relevant to what has happened today, what we're facing as we look to the future. So that's where we're at right now.
Oh, thanks, Jeannie. And you know, the update plan is important because it's not on the agenda, but I think probably everybody knows that I'm submitting an EDA grant application for cable landing infrastructure on each of the 4 major islands. And you know, our plan is, the plan is consistent with supporting that effort. And I think you know, I'm going to need as much support. I'm soliciting support letters for this project, you know, with the EDA. EDA is the Economic Development Administration, part of the federal government. And this is probably one of the big projects that I hope to get funded to build out some broadband infrastructure here in Hawaii. With that, you know, I have been bringing up this topic on a number of calls, and you know, as a result of the HUI, there have been a lot of cool projects that have been ideated. Some have actually gone into implementation. Some are, you know, looking for funding. And Christine and I wanted to kind of go over an opportunity to perhaps further articulate some of those projects. And you know, there's a process that Aina Aloha is conducting, and we wanted to share with you the process that's taking place, and to consider, you know, if anything, documenting some of these projects. And I will definitely call many of you to encourage you to submit something. But this is a way to not only potentially get some funding, but also to at least get it documented and recognized as something that needs to be considered moving forward in terms of, you know, digital equity, infrastructure, you know, closing the digital divide. So with that, Christine, you want to talk a little bit about what's happening with Aina Aloha?
Sure.
Oh, and I'll give you a chance to, I'll share the screen here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see here. While I'm getting the ability to share my screen, thank you, everyone. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the Aina Aloha Economic Futures Initiative. Okay. And okay, hopefully everyone will share my screen. We'll put the links in the chat, but the Aina Aloha Economic Futures Initiative is really a conversation and a framework that's based off of, was created by some members in the Native Hawaiian community, and it really outlines core principles and suggests core principles that can really help provide a framework for us to come together as a community and guide us in the systemic change that we are all working on in our own unique initiatives. So there is a declaration that was created and an action agenda, and people can sign on to the declaration. And I think there are over 2,000 signatories that are on the Aina Aloha Economic Futures Declaration. They presented to the House COVID-19 committee, and I think there are a couple of representatives from the Aina Aloha Economic Futures on that committee now. And it's really provides us all an opportunity to participate in a dialogue, really guided by some really core principles that are really resonating with segments of the community. So I encourage you to look at it. There is also an action agenda, and the action agenda really outlines how the Aina Aloha initiative is organizing discussions and conversations in different segments of the community. And on a webinar that provides an overview of the initiative, but also the opportunity next week to participate in conversations, in online sessions. And those online sessions run 6 to 8 p.m. and they're different themes every day. And so Bert and I are actually co-facilitating the technology and infrastructure discussion that's going to be on Thursday. So I encourage you to look here, to really take a look at the Aina Aloha website, the declaration and the action agenda. And if that resonates with you, and if you'd like to be part of the conversation, you're more than welcome to. It's a very inclusive process. And the purpose of next week is to use an online, I guess, discussion tool to really flush out some of the proposals that are being put into the framework. And so anyone can submit a proposal, on a suggestion on a path forward. And we're going to be actually choosing some of those proposals to really use to flush the ideas out. And if it's very popular, then there'll be more opportunities to discuss the proposals in the future. So it's very iterative, and I think some of the creators had really no idea on how much resonance this initiative actually has with a large segment of the community. So we welcome you to attend and to review the website. Does anyone have any questions about that? Anything to add, Bert?
No, that's great, Christine. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of projects that have already percolated through the Hui, and our po'o for the technology and infrastructure. That's Na'alehu Anthony, and he came on a couple weeks ago to kind of give a quick overview of Aina Aloha. But as talking with him about some of the potential proposals that could get submitted, I think many of them that came out of the Hui would qualify. And I'm thinking I would encourage, all of you who have been a part of any of the, subgroups and ideas that have been put forth. I mean, to take a look at the, Aina Aloha and look at the proposal submittal section and consider submitting something. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll be definitely calling some folks up and seeing if we can help to craft a proposal submittal. I haven't gone through the actual submittal myself, but I will probably put something in there as well to address the cable infrastructure project that I'm working on. So I think it's a great opportunity to, like I said, not only document, but get a wider view of some of the work that we've all been doing here in the Hui across many other eyes in the community. So I want to encourage you to all do that. So yeah, if any questions from the group, again, this online, what they call sort of a plenary session is going to take place tonight at 6. And so that might be a good thing to check out. Senate President, yes, I see your hand is raised.
The only concern that I have, I watched the Hawaii News Now and, was very impressed. And I've read the social media posts advertising it, but in some of the social media posts, the respondents write how enthusiastically they are supportive of Aloha Aina. And so there is a branding issue because that a new certified party to be on the ballot is Aloha Aina. So there is confusion at times by individuals out there as to are you supportive of the political party or are you supportive of the Aina Aloha initiative? And so I think that as long as that is going to be the name, at least through the November elections, you're going to have your work cut out for you to make sure you are correctly identified and branded correctly and not, mistaken for a political party on the ballot. Thanks.
No, that's great
Thank you
input.
for those
And
perspectives.
my interactions with community have kind of shed the light on the sort of the transposition of the words. And Aloha Aina has grown in popularity as love of the land. But if you switch the words around to Aina Aloha, it's the land loves you. And I think the message I wanted to try to share from my personal view is that if we do the right thing, and do the right thing for Hawaii, the land will love you back. And I think the efforts that we try to put forward especially with the Broadband Hui, that's what we'd like to see Hawaii become, a better place, to the point where the land is actually loving you in return. So I don't want to get teary-eyed about it, but that's my take on the whole Aina Aloha name, and it's a big difference between the Aloha Aina brand. So anyway, I just wanted to share that personal insight.
Bert, if I could just add very quickly that within the declaration, there are two references to technology. One of them is engaging technologies to improve healthcare and education, government service, teleworkforce. The other one is equitable access to technology and the internet. And so those, it's very aligned with a lot of the conversations that we've been having through the Broadband Hui in terms of infrastructure and then innovations. And so, those are specifically called out in the declaration, which I think is a testament to how inclusive this discussion has been in the Broadband Hui. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So anyway, any other questions about Aina Aloha? Again, I encourage you to participate, and of course, the Hui call doesn't end at the Hui call. I certainly will be reaching out to many of you as well. All right. So next up, I did want to touch on the rural broadband, because I know a lot of people on the call. We've reached out to all the neighbor islands. We encourage participation, and this is a statewide initiative. And of course, this really kind of started with Hawaiian Tel being forthright in terms of sharing their plans around connectivity to Hana. In fact, I think we have a number of folks that continue to participate from the community in Hana. And I think another area that we'd like to kind of encourage is when projects start to deploy fiber optics to a community that typically doesn't get fiber optic connectivity, is there ways that the Hui can help to drive adoption? And I think this group is really primed and positioned to do that. So I don't know if I don't want to put Ani on the spot here, but I know things are moving forward with Hana, and I know that I think one of the next places is Molokai, and would love to see a discussion start to evolve around deployment to Molokai. So, Ani, you want to say anything about that?
Hi, Bert. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for putting me on the spot, Bert.
Yeah. That's the challenge of being on the Hui call. You get put on the spot.
But hey, knowing you, I'm always prepared.
Good, very good.
No, thank you for the opportunity actually to share an update on what's happening with our East Maui build, and also to just touch base on Molokai and other rural areas that we plan on connecting in the future. So for East Maui build, when I think I updated this group last, it was a couple weeks ago, we were working on the technical details to put together our proposal to landowners to be able to deploy our infrastructure on their land. And in the last 2 weeks, we've made a lot of great progress. Just over the weekend, we finalized all of our letters to landowners to send out to them. These are preliminary letters that we send to all landowners if we're planning on deploying infrastructure on their land. And they have the option of saying yes, no problem, no, or let's discuss. So this will kickstart the process of having conversations with landowners about acquiring easements on their property. So we'll update this group more when we have some of those responses and understand where, you know, where this is headed, whether it's going to be extremely challenging or if we have a few obstacles and hurdles to jump through. Senator English has offered his help, like I've mentioned in the past, to overcome some of those obstacles. When we do face them, we do expect to get, you know, no's like we always do and work through that process. So we'll update this group more when we have more information. But again, good progress has been made on the East Maui front. And then for future builds, anyone caught Bite Marks Cafe with Bert? Also, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago, Bert, you were interviewing Dan Masatomi from our team. And he mentioned during the last soundbite on the show that we are planning on our next deployment would be for Molokai. So that is absolutely coming up. We are in not only planning stages, but close to, you know, figuring out exactly where we're deploying infrastructure and getting all the processes going. So I don't think that we're ready to yet to have a conversation. We just don't have all the details to share. It'll be really high level, I guess. But once we have a little bit more meat to share, I'll definitely share that with this group. But again, Molokai is definitely our next build. And really, last time I think I mentioned that I've shared a detailed list of the various locations we're deploying or plan on deploying in Hawaii based on the Connect America funds and also our private investment dollars. So that's easily referenceable if anybody has any questions on the various communities that are listed in that sheet. And I think, Bert, you did actually upload that to your site. Please just reach out directly and I'm happy to answer those questions.
Thanks,
Hey, Bert.
thanks, Ani. I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead, Gina.
Ani, I just had a really quick question. So who are you working with on Molokai?
In terms of externally?
Well, or locations and just contacts for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, contacts aren't usually our real estate operations teams are the ones who reach out. So I don't have those details, but if you're interested, you know, I'll find out and I'll let you know.
Okay.
You know, and as I mentioned earlier, there's many in the communities that are very interested in the broadband Hui discussions. And I know, Curtis, you put me in touch with somebody from Sustainability Molokai Sustainability or Sustainability Molokai. I mean, I think it was a good connection. I think you know, like Curtis's operations that he's doing with refurbishing computers is spreading its wings and potentially getting out to the neighbor island. So I don't know. Curtis, I don't know if you want to just share quickly about, you know, your connection with the Molokai folks.
Oh yeah, thanks. Thanks, Bert. Actually, Christopher is on the call here too. Christopher O'Brien, he's on Molokai. He's with Sustainable Molokai.
Oh, he slipped through my he slipped through my grid. So maybe I'll have him do a quick intro. Christopher, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Christopher O'Brien. I work for Sustainable Molokai. And I learned about this Hui through meeting about distribution of hardware, a smaller forming statewide coalition with Curtis. And based on that conversation, he brought me into this Hui, partly because through our discussions, getting technology out is one thing, but there are a lot of area of needs on Molokai for broadband. Particularly since there are pretty decent parts of the island that don't have access to any type of wired broadband connection. And then in some areas, the speeds for wired connections are sometimes maybe about 11 or 12 megabits. And To me, that's a little bit slow for a lot of the digital connection needs that we need at this point, especially since we're having to do a lot of video conferencing. So based on that, I was invited to this larger meeting, and happy to be a voice for.
Bert, this is Ani. I have some information to share on Molokai with everybody.
Sure.
Our team is really quick to respond. So we have started some preliminary background work for our fiber build in Molokai. So it's a couple of locations. Kuala Pu'u is one location where we'll deploy 35,000 feet of aerial fiber. And work will begin again this week, just background work to deploy this infrastructure over the course of the next 6 to 8 months. And also another location I'm seeing here is Walapue, and that's 80,000 feet of aerial fiber.
That's excellent.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ani, and Christopher, I mean, once we get what we did with HANA, Hawaii Tel provided me with some, maps that's publicly accessible, and we put that up on the Broadband Hui website. And just like HANA, I mean, we would definitely encourage more conversations about not only where they're going, but how the community could take advantage of that fiber run. So as we get closer, definitely want to have that continued conversation here on the Hui call.
Bert, absolutely.
Thanks, Ani.
We have teams focused on education for the community and to also gather community input specifically around these fiber builds. So what I'll do is I'll connect with them, and then I'll see if they can share some of that info with this group, or at least I can point this group in the right direction where they can get that info.
Okay, sounds good. Great, thanks. Again, so anything that this group wants to kind of pursue with a little bit more depth on rural connectivity, feel free to get in touch with me, and we'll definitely put it on the agenda. I do want to kind of move on, and I want to give Mike Bagley a chance to talk, high level about, what's the challenges with 5G, especially since, there was a reso that went in front of the Hawaii Council that I guess got passed, which is unfortunate. But Mike, you want to give us an update on that?
Yes, and then I'm not speaking for everybody in the industry, because any action taken like that will affect everybody. But the Hawaii Planning Council voted yesterday 8-1 to approve a resolution that would ban 5G from the Big Island based on their call for independent research. The issue there is this is issue that is really a federal preempted issue, the FCC. Now, the resolution is not binding because it's not legally binding, but it does send, to me, the wrong message, because it sends a anti-investment message in the technology, and there are many, many benefits of 5G, the next generation wireless, that would help both urban and rural areas. So from my perspective, it probably needs to be some more education about it and more benefits, and there shouldn't be, a kind of reaction based on non-substantive information or misinformation. So I want to be respectful of the council and respectful of, the whole process, but we really see 5G as a platform by which you can reach more folks, more people, and also not that, but provide faster data, many, many benefits, including supporting public safety. So it's sort of sends a signal that to not invest in the technology. And so we'll get underneath that a little bit. And I think, I don't speak for other carriers or the industry, but from an education standpoint, I think there needs to be more effort to educate folks about what the issues are. And we certainly would be respectful and willing to have any dialogue. But again, I'm just speaking for us. And Bert, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I have been bringing this topic up on the Hui calls, and I've noticed that even in any kind of bills that get presented to the legislature, even if it has the word broadband in it, there's a slew of anti-5G testimony that gets submitted. In fact, there was the broadband infrastructure bill, SB 2527, and if you happen to check it out, there's like a couple of pages of testimony from DBED and from Spectrum, in support of this infrastructure grant program, and there's like 160 pages of anti-5G testimony. So, you can see how overwhelming that becomes for the legislators. And I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the Hui, because, if we're going to move forward with some of the, the technologies that are going to enable us to be competitive in the 21st century, 5G being one of them, we need to give this thing some serious thought on how do we support that. Curtis, I saw your hand up. You want to say something?
Yeah, actually, thanks. So, Mike, I had a question. Forgive the ignorance here, but when we're talking about 5G, is this the same like spectrum as the home routers 5G, but just much more powerful?
No, it's a different type of spectrum. It's millimeter wave spectrum. It's called millimeter wave spectrum for the high end broadband, but it uses different spectrum than what you're talking about.
Okay.
And this spectrum, it goes a shorter distance, but it has much more a larger pipeline, so you get a lot more data through. You get a lot more faster speeds. So it could be 10 times faster than say 4G, and it allows you capability. So if you were to do, for example, driverless cars, you would use 5G spectrum technology. But it's really the greatest difference is a shorter frequency and much faster speed, not the same the spectrum you're talking about.
Okay. I was just curious because, I see, just what Bert said, I see so many people who are just, you mentioned broadband and all of a sudden they're talking about 5G. And it's like, okay, maybe if we can, I don't know, maybe if we can get some money for doing some PSAs or something, just to explain to people that broadband is not wireless. It's not it's not 5G. So, we're talking about running fiber and stuff, not, aerial transmitters. So.
Yeah, it's a subset. I mean, if you say broadband, you're talking about both wireless and wireline. And so there's a lot of range there. But your point, I think, is good that, there does need to be an education component to this. And I think our experience around the country is that when folks are more educated, they understand it much better. So maybe I can work with Bert offline to help with some educational materials, and we can do some outreach, because really folks need to know, and they need to have their questions answered. But we need to separate the myths and the fears from the reality. So appreciate that, Curtis.
Mike, if I could just add that 5G stands for the 5th major generation of wireless service.
Right, and I did put up some 5G resources on the website, and for people who are curious, just go to broadband.hawaii.gov, and then you'll see the top menu, and if you drop down from resources, I have some 5G information there, and of course it's just there's a lot of information, and then also you can find some of the links to the broadband Hui as well. But I did want to point out that to Mark's point and Curtis's, the 5G that we're talking about is a 5th generation, and it's a protocol. It's not necessarily a specific frequency. So it can run anywhere from 600 megahertz to, I don't know, I think Mike, it's like 30 gigs. So it's a whole spectrum. And the protocol enables, the signaling over that wide range of electromagnetic frequencies. So right now you're seeing some folks have told me gotten 5G on their cell phones because there are some 600 megahertz powers, I think, in the Kailua area. But again, it's a protocol, and what I'm concerned about is that the anti-5G folks are also sort of spilling over into Wi-Fi. So they've convinced the folks over at the Kauai County to prevent any Wi-Fi access points to be put up on city or county infrastructure. And so if you extrapolate that to connecting students to Wi-Fi on the bus, you potentially could get anti 5G sentiment showing up for that. So it sort of gets a little viral once people start getting that category sort of misunderstood and then spilling over into things like LTE and Wi-Fi as well. So anyway, that's just some of the things that I've seen happen.
That's exactly why I asked the question, is that I've seen exactly that, where people are saying, oh, the 5G, they're assuming that it's the Wi-Fi, just a much more powerful version of Wi-Fi, and they're trying to get the Wi-Fi banned, and I've seen it slipping into the, to discussions like that. So I think it's critically important that we, run some education campaigns to let them know, look, this is not the same thing. So.
Right.
But I think any education, I mean, it's got to be a comprehensive strategy versus these one-off, this provider does it, this provider. To me, it's got to be really comprehensive. So, Mike, what are you hearing are the main objections or purported objections to the 5G? Is it health related or health concerns, or what are you hearing?
Well, there's a lot. It's interesting because there are a lot of places where they are embracing 5G and they want 5G because they realize all the potential economic benefits and to it. But
you mean a lot of places in Hawaii? I'm sorry to interrupt.
A lot of places in the country, not Hawaii necessarily.
Okay.
Hawaii hasn't gotten it yet, but it's coming. And I think that the issue you raised on the health issue is probably the main issue that I've heard. One of the old objections people used to have to cell sites was aesthetics and people concerned about a tower blocking their views and things like that. That is actually one of the things that 5G doesn't create an issue for, because the main vehicle and the technology is small wireless facility, so just a small attachment to a pole. You don't have that aesthetic concern. But for folks who have mainly objected, use the health issue, but the health issue has been thoroughly looked at, not just by the FCC, but other actual health organizations and other organizations, and there are protocols on that. So there's not any issues that we're aware of that the FCC's raised, but this is the FCC's territory. But yeah, to your point, if there's a concern, that would be the concern.
Well, it seems like getting testimony from those communities that have embraced it and the benefits they're getting from it should be part of the overall outreach strategy. But anyway, that might be the basis of a subgroup, Bert.
Yeah. So I did see Senate President raise his hand.
Yeah, when you talk about the coordinated strategy, I don't know if it was in the window of 2010 through 2012. Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, the electric utility on Kauai, was going to install smart meters for all of those. And then they had the same thing about the, waves that are generated by the smart meters were going to create health hazard, etc. So, KIUC spent over $100,000 in an education campaign, and the state law just says for co-ops, if you have 100 signatures, you can put it to a vote of the membership. So they actually had an election, and there were like 330 people in opposition to the smart meters, and overwhelming majority in favor of it. Beth Tokioka is the communications person at KIUC. Well, she wasn't with them at the time. You may want to reach out and see what kind of methods that they employed, but they certainly had a concentrated, coordinated educational effort for the community to really, dispel a lot of the things that were being said in social media and in other public venues.
Their solution, okay, you don't have to have a smart meter, but if you don't, we're going to charge you more because we have to send out someone to read your meter. Wasn't there some economic incentive?
Yes, well, they would just be charged because they'd have to send a physical person.
Right. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks. Bill Sides, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I've had the same questions out here regarding the cable coming in, whether it's, going to be 5G and all that. And I don't find it hard to explain that away. I think the main thing, like before it came up about the meters, and I talked to people about that, and I kind of explained to them that they'd have more exposure to a radar range than they would a meter. And I think I have a hard time understanding the 5G myself, because I've talked to a couple of different consultants out that are quite knowledgeable, and one will say that they're smaller antennas, but the signal doesn't travel as far. It's been around for years. It's safe. And the other would say, yeah, but there's more of them, and therefore the exposure to be close to one's more. And I get confused. I think what I would think you'd need to explain it to the locals would be something that you can compare it to and simplify the explanation. Because to get into the wavelengths and all that kind of stuff goes beyond too many people.
Thanks, Bill. Point well taken. Elizabeth, I know you're just anxious to say something.
Actually, a lot of it has already been said. I was just going to add a couple of things, which is I think one way to think about 5G is just part of the evolution. I mean, the additional things we were able to do with our phones from 1G to 2G and then 3G and 4G and now 4G LTE. So 5G will be another step of that. It's I think nothing super new, but we'll be able to do a lot more than what we are able to do now. So that's one way to think of it. And the only other thing is, just to reinforce what you said, Bert, we are seeing that it's spilling over, and in a lot of the rural areas within the state where we're really trying hard to improve coverage, we're getting blocked with every new application to build a new tower. And even though it's 4G LTE, folks just assume it's 5G, and then they'll come out against it. So that's what we're facing on the ground.
Okay, thanks. Well, we'll kind of huddle up, and I think to Jeannie's point, we might need to rally some forces to get some kind of a campaign going. So, Jean, I know you're flush with money, so I think we'll tap some of that.
Right.
I got one more question, Bert. For the service providers, have you guys, I've seen these videos of other cities, countries, whatever, where they're vandalizing the equipment, assuming it's 5G. Have you guys experienced any of that here in Hawaii at all?
Not yet, but I know that folks within the state are monitoring that issue. I will say, though, I've read in the paper a few insinuations toward that kind of action.
Yeah, same here. We have no reported incidences of any effort like that in Hawaii, but we'll keep monitoring.
Yeah, and I am concerned about that as well, because, as an open data advocate, and the city and county of Honolulu does get data on where some of the small cells are located on city infrastructure. On one hand, I'm like an advocate for open data and mapping, but at the same time, I'm also concerned that in the wrong hands, that could be just a way for people who want to cause some damage to find the locations. And So anyway, I think it's something to think about. Again, thank you for everybody's input into this, and we'll try to help kind of move it along. Which sort of brings me to the next topic, which I know has had some good discussion in previous calls about broadband mapping and data. And I think we have all the right parties here to kind of discuss, where we can go in terms of collectively having better ideas on mapping and, gathering data. I did want to give Brianna a chance to maybe update us on the Aloha Plus dashboard. I know Celeste kind of gave us a kind of an overview last week, but I think from a more tactical standpoint, Brianna and Megan are definitely involved with the advancement of the Aloha Plus dashboard, and I think her and her team's commitment to getting broadband mapping is going to really be helpful. So, Brianna, I mean, give us an idea as to where you guys want to take the dashboard.
Yeah, thank you, Bert. Yeah, no, happy to share. I know Celeste was able to share a bit more context about the dashboard, so I can get kind of more into the specifics. But yes, I think as Celeste probably shared, the Aloha Plus dashboard, it's really tracking social, economic, and environmental priorities that the state and Hawaii have identified. It's really our framework to track local progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is launched by the legislature, so I want to mahalo Senator Majority Leader English, as well as Senate President, and then with the counties and business and community partners. So it's really a diverse mix of different audiences that the dashboard strives to serve. And right now we are tracking broadband data, access to open information, and data including access, speed, geospatial mapping. However, I think it's really just a snapshot of what we could be featuring and sharing on the dashboard. We are going to be actually migrating the dashboard this summer to Esri technology, so be much more interactive. And I think we have the opportunity to really explore a lot more mapping features. And something that I think we would really be looking to do is to enhance and add more data around digital inclusion, access, broadband, look at more Esri mapping capabilities, look if we can give a better snapshot of where we are, as well as tell stories of different underserved communities, and really help to convey the number of different priorities and topics that I think have been discussed today. So I maybe just more in short to say, this is where we are in terms of what we're tracking to date. I think the capabilities that we'd have in terms of moving to a more interactive platform in the next couple of months, and be really happy to work with this group and any folks to identify more data, more mapping, more other features that could really enhance what we can convey on the platform. So I'll leave it at that, and happy to share more and work with folks on next steps.
Thanks, Brianna. And last week, DCCA has been a regular attendee of the Hui calls, and we talked a little bit about the no internet service tool that is now available, and we want to rally the community to kind of crowdsource some of that information. I know, Mel, you've been kind of involved with getting some folks to take advantage of the tool. I mean, how's your progress been with that?
Yeah, I had a meeting with Lisa, Jeremy, and Kathy this past week regarding, I think there's two tools. One is the no internet tool or map, and then the other tool was the speed test or speed map tool. And from my understanding, what I learned is kind of focusing this in phases. The first is to focus more on the no internet. And by the way, both of these tools are targeting, at this point, wireline broadband access, although it can do wireless, but not to confuse the two and make it too complicated. They decided they're going to go in phases like this. So the initial rollout was around wireline access, and to start focusing on the no internet, and then building onto it with the speed tests. So I think they've tried to publicize it in the past, but it really needs some sort of organizational push behind it in the various communities to get people to actually go onto the site. I don't think the site is that complicated for end users to actually use it, but you need some stimulus and some urging and education for people to go out and start doing that. My understanding is that they did work with the libraries, I think, early on, because naturally the libraries are out in the community. So I guess at this point we wanted to see, and you had asked the question of whether certain organizations, whether it's telehealth or wherever, or Transform Hawaii, was willing to be those organizations to get out there. So I think it's more of a question right now. We have the tool, we have flyers, but at the same time, I'm hearing we have now this dashboard that, this Aloha Plus dashboard. We've got other mapping we're doing. We got all different, I guess, efforts going on. So I guess it's a broad, you know, for me now, it's a broader question of which one should we pursue.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in prior Hui calls. You know, it's all about the data, right, and gathering the data. And if the data is open and accessible via an API or some form of, you know, data that could be accessible by any of the community members to do the mapping. So whether it's, and I think it's maybe a question for DCCA and maybe Jeremy, that, you know, if the data that is provided to the, let's say the no internet service tool is also available for access by the dashboard and the folks over at Hawaii Plus Challenge. In fact, they're working on migrating from Socrata, which is an open data portal, to Esri. If the data is available, it doesn't matter who's gonna, you know, kind of map it. So it can reside on the no internet service map, or it could also be demonstrated or shown on the dashboard. So I don't know, Brianna or Megan, you want to say a little bit about
Well, if I could add real quickly one short one, I think, yeah, that's correct in terms, and we had between myself and Kendrick and Arthur and now Jared and me, we all agree that it should be a one platform that's open data. So I think that's pretty much a non-issue. We can use Esri. But I think more of the issue is sourcing the information. And if we have too many different people sourcing the information, because just with the no internet access alone, you know, we haven't had huge success, right? So it's a matter of whether we want to concentrate our efforts on sourcing efforts collectively, or we're going to have all these little sourcing efforts everywhere, you know, and then that's kind of more of the issue to me.
Well, okay, so just my quick thought on that, and again, I'm happy to get input from others, but communities tend to be somewhat confined, or maybe amongst a community of interest. And so those community of interest, whether it's telehealth or with Christine and Transform Hawaii Gov, I mean, those are their communities. And so if there's an effort to get the word out for a mapping project, you know, it would probably be somewhat contained in that set of contacts within that community. So in my opinion, I mean, the more communities that you have involved with crowdsourcing, the more chance that you're going to get data. I don't think there's one organization that has the sort of the overall capacity to, you know, reach everybody that you would want to participate in this. So that's my input on, you know, using various communities that already have a community of interest.
I think, yeah, I'm sorry if I miscommunicated, Bert. I'm not saying the more community organizations, obviously the better. But what I'm talking about is what we're going to use those communities to source. So last time we talked about, I think this initially started with us talking about creating maps of availability. And then Mike Bagley brought up a very good point. It says, instead of a map of availability, we should have a map of where we don't have access. And that's how this all started discussion. So the idea was that if we could all concentrate our efforts on using and populating this data of where internet access doesn't exist, starting with landline first and then wireless next, at least we would have had set some milestone and goals and accomplished that task of creating a comprehensive, complete map of the gaps. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. And we could involve as many of the organizations, and the more the better. But my thought is on at least getting aligned on what data we're going to source first.
I think that's a good point, and I think from a mapping standpoint, we've got some mapping experts on the call. I know Kendrick is on the call. I see Ben Trevino. I think it's a matter of, if we want to, let's say, focus today on no internet access tool, primarily it'll be I guess wireline service. Why don't we put that forth as a initiative and see how far we can get with with crowdsourcing that information. And then from a mapping standpoint, you got the folks from Hawaii Green Growth. There's the mapping projects that Hawaii Data Collaborative can help with. I mean, so I think it's a matter of focusing on what do we want to go after. So if we want to start with no internet service, I mean, I think that's a great place to start.
I think you hit it on the head, Brett, exactly like that. And then, and then we can always go to wireless after we feel good about the no internet with speed for, So that's the, question I want to pose out there before we initiate some sort of action that, we won't get much traction on.
Okay, point well taken, and I think let's focus in on that, and then we'll get everybody kind of mobilized on the no internet service tool. Any response to that or comments?
This is Christine. I mean, I think that's a great idea, and Transform Hawaii government actually, as soon as we heard about the DCCA no internet service and the internet speed, we actually posted that on our website and in our social media. But I do think it might be worth considering a broader campaign, especially on the neighbor islands where that would be important to catch. So it might maybe. I don't know if there's a subcommittee that can work with DCCA to get some narrative around the importance of that and think about a campaign. But, if that's what we're going to focus on, that might be an action item to take over the next week or so. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think to Mel's point, if we all have limited resources and we want to try to get this thing off the ground, it's probably a good idea to focus in on one of them, see how far we get. And if no internet service is something that I think resonates with a lot of people, let's focus in on that. And then with success, we can spread that particular initiative across other efforts to do maybe a speed test type of effort. But let's focus on no internet access and see how far we get with some mapping and sort of help tell the story about what we can find, with that effort. Okay, great. Thanks, thanks for the input.
Is Lisa or Jeremy on, or Kathy from DCCA? Maybe not.
I think I saw Jeremy on.
I'm on.
Well, Lisa's on too, but she's shy.
I'm on as well.
I mean, the thing is, I know that the focus is on trying to get a map. I mean, one of the things I passed out to Bert as well as Mel like a week or two ago was maps that were created by the FCC that's available, because the RDOF maps just came out, areas where they have identified that speeds of 3 and 25 and 3 are not there. So if you look at those maps, it's already kind of mapped out, because that's where RDOF is going to be spending money, right? So, I mean, if the idea is to focus on where there is not sufficient internet, I think if we look at the recent RDOF maps that were passed out, and I know I gave it to Bert as well as Mel, it's already mapped out about where wired line service is not present. So I mean, maybe Bert could share those maps that we passed out, because those are from the FCC, RDOF, and those are readily available. It's on the public site, on the FCC site. So it's kind of already done in that sense. because that's where monies from the federal government are going to be going in the next October time when they're going to do the auction for RDOF phase 1. So,
Okay, so Lisa, if the RDOF maps are sufficient, then we don't have to do this wireline internet map. Then at least that's cared for. We got. Then
I think
should we
people
then
have to,
focus on the wireless map or
I think
instead of the
people have to
wireline?
be, I think people have to look at it and decide whether it's sufficient, right? So
Yeah, no, Lisa, no, that's a good point. Let me go back and take a look at that, and then, you know, 'cause,
right.
if it's the entire census block, you know, the resolution might not be as good as we would want it, but I haven't looked at it, so I gotta take a
Right.
closer look.
And,
And
it's
if
by
the
census blocks and it's by islands. So it takes one island and tells where it might be lacking. The darker the color it is, more people don't have wireline service there.
right,
Lighter the color
right.
it is, less people, but it's sort of already mapped for the wireline side.
And I think to your point, Lisa, I mean, as much as we might be able to get higher resolution, at the end of the day, what we want to see happen is that, you know, the carriers like Hawaiian Telcom would actually apply for RDOF grants to go after, you know, putting infrastructure in those areas as well. I guess, and then Mel, I mean, the other thing that could benefit from a higher resolution would be whether if we can't wait for, you know, RDOF, you know, reverse auction processes. I mean, that's probably where mobile internet or mobile Wi-Fi initiatives would you know take place. Is those areas that don't have internet. So again,
So I think
we'll,
yeah, maybe you and I can look at that, Bert, because I looked at the maps. So one is the resolution is one. The other is we don't know what kind of technology, so what bandwidth of speed exists, because it doesn't define that yet. Could be DSL, could be, you know, fiber to the node. Who knows what exists? It just shows that we have coverage, right? So that would be more bandwidth and speed issue. But yeah, that's a good point. We could look at that and start there and then loop back.
okay.
And then
Okay,
the next
yeah.
question would be, would it then be worth doing the wireless focus on the no internet? If we could use RDOF for wireline, I guess a question for the folks on the call, do we want to focus on getting wireless data? Because we don't have a map, an RDOF map for wireless.
Yeah, that's a little more complicated, and I'd like to see if we can get any of the wireless guys on the to give us some feedback on that. I mean, what is the, you know, RDOF and FCC efforts have been primarily around wireline service, and you know, in trying to determine no internet service based on wireless, how does that actually, what does that actually inform us of? And you know, maybe I'll pick on Mike Bagley first. Well, if Mike is not on,
Mike is the one that said it would be helpful to them. He's the one that suggested it. We thought that was a great idea.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. He might have dropped off, and you know, Elizabeth, you're next on my my list of wireless. What does that imply? I mean, if we start to sort of do a crowdsourcing on, you know, no internet service based on wireless, does that mean that there may be no tower there? Or what does that inform people of?
Basically, you would show gaps of wireless service and where there is no service, I'm guessing regardless of carrier. But then I know that the purpose of broadband mapping was maybe to inform where we would want to build fiber. And then it kind of goes back to the earlier conversation, is if there's a wireless coverage gap You know, and it is those areas where I think any of the carriers are trying to build, but we're running into sort of the anti-stuff.
So let me ask this question then, Elizabeth. That's a good point. So if I were to look at the RDOF map, would that be a surrogate for wireless? Because that would indicate you wouldn't have a backhaul that exists in that area, a backbone or backhaul.
That's a good point, right? And I will add that whenever we do build in a rural area, have power or fiber, and I'm not speaking on behalf of other carriers. I'm not exactly sure how it works with them, but at least with us, you know, we pay to bring, as you indicated, the backhaul, the fiber, trench it, the power, and that kind of helps to bring that infrastructure to the area.
Could I add that having cell service, for lack of a better term, does not mean you have broadband service. As soon as your signal strength drops, your ability to move data drops to sometimes a point where you can't get any broadband service at all. You might still be able to make a call like I can from my house, but if I did not have Spectrum broadband here, I could barely do a thing on my phone. And I'm actually providing a map to Mike Bagley of the area and the signal strength in my area and the corridor that I drive in, which is really poor for about 1/4 of my drive to work. And I'm in a very populated area.
Mark,
Yeah,
I think,
and again, oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was going to say, like, that's a really good point. But in other areas, and it shows in, I think, the Hawaii Data Collaborative information, as well as some folks do rely just on cell service as their access to internet.
Right. Yeah, that was the question I was going to ask is what do you rely on? If it's cell, then, well, maybe what we should do, because for time's sake, Bert, maybe we can take this offline, starting with you and I, and then add on and then really talk through this and come up with a framework for pursuing this MAP initiative. I think this has been helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, you know, it's going to be a balance between what resources do we have to put forth on this, and what would the information best inform action that would take place. And you know, if it's getting the wireline folks to do you know, RDOF grants, then great. If not, then you know, maybe we got to focus in on some wireless activity. So yeah, you know, we'll take this offline and we'll kind of convene the mapping folks and Mel, and you know, let's kind of move this forward. So
Quick question for Mark.
I just cut you off briefly. I wanted to make sure everybody on the call is aware. Hawaiian Telecom is the only provider in Hawaii who has applied for Connect America funds. We have won it as part of an auction, and we, without, you know, I'm sure this is private information, and organizations not supposed to share about their future plans, but we applied for Connect America funds in the past, almost every phase. We've won Connect America Fund dollars to deploy broadband and high-speed internet in many local rural locations in Hawaii, and are continuing to do so. So as you could imagine, if RDOF is a possibility, which it is for us, it would be hard for us to not apply. So there's no needing to push Hawaiian Telecom to apply for RDOF. It very much, I believe, is something that will be in our future.
I have a question.
you know, oh, go ahead, Christine.
Well, I mean, I'm just kind of curious or wondering, especially given the conversations going on with, you know, I know Aloha, that how much does the community know that the telecom carriers have an opportunity to implement, you know, broadband? And especially now, as we kind of coming out of a phase of COVID-19, there's just more awareness, more interest, more need for internet access coming from the community. And is there an opportunity to just bring together the community interest with the telecom carriers, for example, to actually think through through where, you know, prioritize. You know, I'm just kind of curious about that. Maybe the strategic plan helps with that, or future strategic discussions sort of help with that. But I'm hearing Ani, and I'm just wondering, does the community actually know that, and know that something's coming on the pipe? And would it make any difference if the communities in need advocate for that and support those efforts? And that might result in a sort of faster implementation, or definitely more integrated implementation.
You know, that's a
Yeah.
good Ani question, because, you know, the folks over at Hawaiian Telecom, I mean, they have their process, and it involves budgeting, it involves, you know, resources, it involves timing on how they can deploy infrastructure, and I, you know, I can't speak for Hawaiian Tel, but, you know, it's a process that may appear, you know, kind of one-sided. Is there an opportunity for, you know, the other side to voice, you know, their interest? And I know Bill Sides is, you know, had to leave, but, you know, he can probably speak to the fact that, you know, he's been advocating for connectivity for the last, I don't know how many decades. So again, you know, it could be a long process. I mean, I'm all for getting a two-sided conversation going. But Ani, I mean, I don't know if you want to share what your guys' process of deciding, you know, which communities get service or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bert and Christine. Thanks for that question. Our interests are very much aligned. Our objective as an organization is to deploy as much fiber as possible in Hawaii and connect as many communities, both urban and rural, now more rural because, you know, majority of our urban populations are pretty connected, as we can. That's in our long-term plan, that's in our current goals, that has been our plan for the last decade. We've invested close to $1 billion out of private investment dollars in deploying fiber, which is why we're not having any capacity issues right now. Our network's functioning at a really high optimum level. But I will say that there are many challenges in the way of deploying fiber in rural communities today. We try to overcome them, and sometimes it takes some time before we're successful. I know with the East Maui conversation, we brought it up to this group because we believed, and historically we have had a lot of trouble getting easements in that area based on the various routes that we've had to pencil out. So getting easements is a challenge. Getting capital is a challenge. So when we talk about the Connect America funds and we talk about RDOF, I know Lisa mentioned various census blocks that are listed in the RDOF application by the FCC. We really go by what the federal government tells us we can spend the Connect America Fund dollars on. And like I mentioned in previous calls, we will deploy private investment dollars into those builds along the Connect America Fund route. But if Connect America Fund, the FCC tells us that, you know, with the amount that, for example, we win with the Connect America funds, we have to deploy in these census blocks, we're locked in. We carry with us a heightened level of regulatory oversight because we accept and win those Connect America Fund federal dollars. With RDOF, it'll be more of the same. And this is the reason why you don't see any other providers applying for Connect America Fund dollars or for RDOF in the future. You'll see it because it comes with it a huge, heavy regulatory burden that we bear. We do it because we know it's the best thing for our state. We do it because we know that without that type of capital, it is extremely difficult to deploy in rural communities, especially ones in our islands, sadly, because of the geography that we deal with. So there are a lot of challenges. Mel, I'm not done. 1 second, I'm sorry. There are a lot of challenges that we face. Capital is one. The entire process from permitting to getting easements to figuring out the exact routes based on geography, based on landowner requests, based on what we can negotiate with the city, with the various owners. There are a lot of interests, community interests too. So we try to bring it all together. We have teams that are inform everybody. And then once we do deploy the infrastructure, then we have an added challenge of how do we get people to now subscribe for the service. And that in and of itself sometimes is a challenge because it's, you know, running a campaign in a community for a long period of time so people know that they now have connectivity available and they are, you know, depending on their household and type of income, they can apply for the program that we have for low-income families, or they need high-speed internet and they want it via fiber, and let's say they had copper before, now they can transition. So we work through all the details. Bert, you're absolutely right. It's an entire process that our organization absorbs. But fundamentally, we need capital. And so applying for federal grants, like RDOF, like Connect America funds, like any other future infrastructure grants that may come out, is really, and making those available to providers is the key to deploying more fiber. Usership, however, is a different story. That's when we have to work with the communities to make them aware of what's available to them and how it can change their lives and how it can complement, what they do and how they do it. Now I'm done.
I was going to add, Christine, to what Ani is saying. To your question, I think, and it kind of ties back to our initial discussion about what granularity we wanted to have, whether we just look at an RDOF macro chart. There are going to be gaps all over. So the question is, we have to have multiple ways of delivery to cover those smaller gaps. But if we don't know where they're at, then we as a WHOI won't know where to provide these other alternative solutions that may not fit the business case for Hawaiian Tel, but might fit another case for somebody else. So I think that's the level of discussion that we started today. And that's why I said probably Bert and I, we're going to talk about this and figure these things out, because I think your question is point on. So we understand the parameters that Hawaiian Tel faces. And, obviously it's a for-profit company that can't be losing money. I used to be, but there are other ways to serve these gaps. And if we don't know about them, nobody will.
Right. And again, it's a balance between, getting the WHOI involved with, focusing on perhaps where Hawaiian Tel is deploying Reconnect or Connect America funds, and can maybe help drive some adoption. But at the same time, another program could be, how do we identify those gaps that Mel is also identifying or bringing up, and how do we go and help to fill that gap? And again, it's all a matter of priorities and resources, and what do we want to focus our attention on, given that we're all pretty much spread pretty thin, on this. Everybody participating in this pretty spread out, right?
The one more thing I'd add in is that we're just talking about the infrastructure and the coverage side, Christine, but we also, I mentioned last time, is the affordability. So if you have only one provider, they have no choice, right? So in Mark's case, his preference might be, for whatever reason, wireless. I don't know what the reason is, but some places have no choice. And some of these maps actually show whether they have 1, 2, or 3 choices, and it all becomes a matter of the level of service or the quality of service, the pricing. It's a combination of things.
And
right, and that's the.
Bert, with Mel's point about not having a choice, that's actually a really good consideration that I think this WHOI needs to make. But what I will inform everybody about is, when we deploy in rural communities, and for example, we deploy our infrastructure where infrastructure was not there before, so now we're providing high-speed internet to communities that, for example, didn't have that option before. As the incumbent local exchange provider for the state, we deploy our infrastructure, and we need to, based on the Federal Communications Act, Telecommunications Act of 1996, we're required to let our competitors ride our infrastructure at cost to provide their services. So we put in the investment dollars, we deploy infrastructure, and then our competition, whomever they may be, because of the Telecom Act of 1986, has the opportunity to ride along our infrastructure that we deployed at cost. So others may see that as a huge disadvantage of being the incumbent local exchange provider. And from my perspective, that those federal laws are archaic, because they were meant to really help jumpstart an industry when we were the old telco, like telephone line monopoly back in the day. But from Hawaiian Telecom's perspective, and we would love for other service providers to jump on board. Oftentimes, though, they don't, because in these rural communities, there isn't money to make. you don't have, dense populations of homes where you can charge, however much a month and be able to get, ridership from an entire community. You're deploying all this infrastructure, sometimes for no more than 500 homes in that entire, area. So sometimes profitability prevents our competition or other providers from going out to rural communities. It's not the infrastructure. It's not anything, but that. So that's a good consideration, I think, for this HUI to keep in mind.
I appreciate that. And again, the HUI is really looking at alternatives, right? So it's not just one choice has to fit everybody. And that's where things like Wi-Fi on wheels or community networks or any of the alternatives to just the basic rates that whether it's Hawaiian Telecom or Spectrum offers. So that's our sort of community effort to be creative on how some of these options might service communities. So again, I appreciate all the the conversation around this topic, and I think we've definitely got work to do moving forward. We're kind of at our close to our 10:30 mark.
Can I jump in before we cut out? I just want to add that I looked at the RDOF map, and if I'm reading it correctly, I don't think it maps entirely. Like I think it was supposed to be whatever areas are under 25.3, and right. Yeah, it's not accurate, at least for Molokai. It excludes like homestead areas and other areas on the map. And when you look at the other FCC, I think their fixed broadband map, that one's a little bit more accurate. Like it shows that you're missing large areas on that map. So in terms of accuracy, I don't know if that RDOF map is going to work, at least for what we're trying to do. But I just wanted to throw that out there before we leave the meeting today.
No, that's a great point. And Chris, I mean, I think we are looking for people on the ground like yourself, who has take a closer look at the map, can easily pick out areas that may or may not be served, and that's where we could perhaps focus on getting additional data, whether it's through the no internet service tool or just crowdsourcing that kind of information. So again, we'll huddle up and figure out how do we get more refinement in getting the data and making more informed decisions on where some of this deployment might take place. So again, without I don't want to take up more of your time, and I want to appreciate everybody's participation in this broadband HUI call. There are some couple topics that I didn't get to talk about, but we'll save that for the next meeting. I do want to give a chance for maybe Christine to maybe do some just closing remark, and then I'll go to Jeannie.
Thank you, Barton. I think I'd like to thank everyone for continuing to participate in the broadband HUI discussions. And, Jeannie and Bert and I are looking for opportunities to continue the discussions meaningfully through the summer and towards the next legislative session as far as what would be needed, what is valuable. And I personally find the conversation of community need and what are the needs in the community, and there's significant interest in the community who are very resourceful on the neighbor islands with this sort of the gap in access to broadband and where they get it from. And I think there's an opportunity to have a conversation there that hopefully we can follow up with in the future. So thank you everyone for participating. Please continue to join us. It's a very needed conversation that we're having as we just try to really address where the shortfalls are. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Jeannie?
Yeah, I look forward to having a deeper dive on the 5G situation. I think we're behind the 8 ball on that one, and no time like now to get started on looking at what can be done to reach out and educate and counter the messages that are being propagated out there, misleading messages, inaccurate messages, and so forth. We certainly have all the firepower on this group to look at some real strategy, but it will take comprehensive strategy because they seem to pop up everywhere. And the fact that they got as far as they did on Hawaii Island should be a, you know, something we pay really good attention to, because it takes a real grassroots effort to get it to that stage. So, you know, the wave is there, and we really need to look at, you know, how to address this. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jeannie. I'll definitely give you a call, and we can huddle up on how we want to approach that topic. So again, I want to thank everybody for participating in the Broadband Hui call. Next call is going to be on the 15th, and I will get the recording out to everybody if you want to share that, and if you missed anything. So you guys have you know, a great week. You stay safe, and you all stay awesome. Thanks a lot.